I spent the next few weeks training under Mr. Hollowfield, which was actually more grueling than I thought it would be. Apparently, my physique wasn't exactly built for his style. So, in order to properly master it, he had me undergo training of the physical variety rather than in the style to begin with. Apparently, in order to properly use his style of martial arts, I needed to develop two things that were key to the style. First of which was strength and maneuverability in the hands. They were always vital in almost any martial arts style, but in his particular style, they required an increased level of physical strength in them. Both the hands and the wrists were very important. So, he had me working with some custom equipment that he had made. Basically, a system that attached to weights through wires that connected to rings within a box-like container. The weights would be contained below it. All the strings leading up to rings within this box that were held in stationary positions. 10 rings in all, one for each finger. All you had to do was place your fingers inside of the rings, and then, with all of your fingers extended and through the rings, you simply gripped your hand. By pulling at the rings attached to the wires, you were pulling at the weights, lifting them off of the ground slightly. This was actually very difficult, far more so than you'd probably expect. By the end of the first day, I couldn't move my fingers. Luckily for me, it was the weekend, so I had a few days to recover from it before returning to school, but even then, my fingers weren't in great shape. But I was at least able to write. After which, the training resumed, with a little bit of extra strength built up in my fingers at that point. It was a little less wearing, but still no cakewalk. The amount of weight that I was lifting with the tensing of my fingers was very heavy. In fact, he refused to actually tell me how much weight I was lifting. He said that it would only be a block to me mentally, that the amount of weight wasn't important. It was the developing of the physical strength, that I could know the weight once it was no longer important. He also had a set of, well, something like gauntlets. Once again with wires attached to the fingers, except this was a reverse. Rather than tensing my hands and curling them into fists, this one worked in the reverse fashion. My fingers would be curled into fists by the tension of the wires, and my goal was to extend my fingers to full span. Once again, the amount of tension was incredible. It was a very difficult process that I went through for, well, weeks. I, of course, didn't spend all my time training. The rest of my free time, besides school, was spent with Renee and my other friends. At this point, Renee had become very accepted, basically part of the family. Well, so to speak. Spending lots of time at both my house and out and about. Going to catch movies and going out to grab food. Picking random spots and just hanging out for no reason. While Steve and Lisa jabber on about nonsensical things. What was going on in school, stupid jokes, the regular stuff. Me and Renee would regularly talk about how things were going with me and her father. The primary problem being that, up to this point, our conversations usually tended to stick around martial arts. I would occasionally try to talk to him about other things, ask him about his life, and tell him a little bit about mine. But one way or another, her dad usually found a way to work it back into the martial arts. It's funny, most teachers simply tell you to focus, that the training is what's important, that you're lacking in discipline. But Renee's father didn't really do that, so long as I was actually performing the training effectively, which of course I always was. He wouldn't do those things. Rather, he would simply force every conversation back into the martial arts by talking about how I can use that experience as a lesson to apply to martial arts itself. Whether I was talking about relationships or people, he would always find a way to work it so that the conversation added up to a lesson, something to learn and apply to my martial arts skill, which was both insightful as well as somewhat annoying when you're actually trying to get to know the guy a bit. It was clear that he wanted to keep me as a student, establishing the student-master relationship. The fact that I was Renee's friend didn't seem to really mean anything. Of course, he didn't know I was Renee's boyfriend. But finally, we came around to actual training. After he felt that I had built up enough hand and wrist strength, he began instructing me in the first forms of his martial arts style. The technique was actually very intricate and had a very complex system of hand motions that went into the attacks, and even the defenses, relying very heavily on grip strength and finger maneuverability. In attacks, one would have to quickly grasp their opponent, and before their opponent could move, utilize that grasp, which was why the intense grip strength and finger maneuverability was important. For example, one technique, which was a counter to an attack, basically leveled the finger strength and wrist strength that you develop in order to use a single motion to flip your opponent without relying on your body's physical strength, only your hand and wrist strength. They would swing the attack, and you would have to maneuver yourself, slipping beside the attack, grasping both the wrist and the arm, and using a heavy twist motion. The strength in your hands and wrists would ensure a grip, as well as allow you to actually apply enough force to take the person off their feet and send them into the spin, at which point they were basically at your mercy. And with the amount of physical hand and wrist strength that you had, no normal person was going to be able to stand on their feet with that much pressure applied, so to speak. Everything seemed to be going fairly well. I was at very least establishing myself as a good student, I hoped. Mr. Hollowfield seemed impressed with the results that I yielded, learning his style very effectively. He was a good teacher, despite the fact that he claims he's never had a student before, and actually complimented me on the speed at which I was acquiring skill in his style. Of course, I was still only learning the beginning sets of movements and counters, attacks, and things like that. I was far from a master of it, and hadn't learned the entire style by a long shot. But I was making good progress, and that was what's important. Renee was a little bit disappointed that I wasn't able to turn things a little bit more personal, but she completely understood it. Her father, according to her, was a very hard man to get to know, and didn't trust people easily. But she was sure that I was making good progress, and that martial arts would definitely be the gateway that allowed him to open up. On this particular night, we had just finished watching a movie. This particular one was called Smash House, a great action flick that basically revolved around a large group of hitmen being abducted, locked inside of a mansion, and forced to have a kill-or-be-killed competition, with the winner being the only one being given the key to their freedom. As we exited the movie theater, Steve was, of course, the first person to pipe up. "Yeah, that movie was awesome, man." I mean, seriously, that one chick with the wires was killing it. I so wish she would have won. Ugh, they never let women win. Especially when it comes to anything like combat. It always has to be a dude. It's so prejudiced, really. Like women can't be badasses. You know, for once, I think I'm actually agreeing with Steve, Renee replied. They so need to let women win in these movies every once in a while. I mean, what's the point of putting them in the movie as a badass if they're never going to let any of them win? Yeah, I think it might be the first good point Steve's ever made. Congratulations, 1 point on the scoreboard. Ha ha, Steve replied, feeling somewhat annoyed with the berating. Is this how it's going to be every time I share my opinion? No, Steve. Just when you surprise us with your opinion. Which is fairly rare, I replied. Ugh, whatever. I'm famished. Let's grab something to eat. You know, you could have gotten popcorn, I replied. Or some of the other concession snacks. No way, dude. That stuff is way too expensive. My allowance will not cover it. Oh, the pizza place is back up. They closed for some renovations, but now that they're running again... Pizza, anyone? Steve said, smiling and looking back and forth between us. Come on, you know you're craving some pizza. Yeah, I think I'm with Steve, Lisa replied. Pizza definitely sounds good. Ah, pepperoni and pineapple. Ugh, I said. Stop talking about pineapple on pizza. You're making me sick. How do you even eat that? Because it's delicious, Lisa replied. Yeah, you can think it's delicious all you like. I still think it's gross. Fruit does not belong on pizza. If I wanted something sweet, I would eat something sweet. Pizza is meant to be garlic and tomato sauce and delicious melty cheese. It's a salty, delicious treat, with meats and vegetables and stuff. But I suppose everyone has their own opinion. So, are we in agreement for pizza? Lisa said as she started stepping towards the car. No, actually, I'm pretty full. In between the popcorn and the jelly bellies, I don't think I need to eat anything else, Renee added, grabbing me by the arm. Lisa, why don't you take Steve and you guys can go and grab some pizza? And me and Victor can go hang out for a little while, she said as she tossed Lisa the keys. Oh, and Lisa, whatever you do, don't let Steve drive. I don't want his musk on my driver's seat. And I will know. Really? Lisa replied, grabbing the keys out of the air. You're letting me drive the car? Trust me, you have my word. Steve won't touch the wheel, she said giddily as she hopped in. Oh, what kind of bum deal is that? Steve said, opening the passenger side door. Prejudiced. Prejudice, I say. Prejudiced against style, he said, sliding into the passenger seat and closing the door. So, are you two lovebirds going to catch up, or where are we going to pick you up? Don't worry about it. We'll call you, Renee said, giving them a wave. And with that, they drove off, heading for the pizza place and leaving me and Renee alone.